Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. David Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new team therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. David is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda.
Hello, David. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Absolutely.
And welcome listeners to podcast episode 176. So, some of the listeners don't know this because we sent it to the listserv online of team certified therapists, that we sent out a survey asking listeners if they liked the live therapy podcasts to be posted the entire from start to finish, like a 2-hour or longer episode, or break it up into 2 different episodes. And it was slightly favored. The longer episodes was slightly favored, but not significantly. And you were saying that you have a solution so that everybody would be happy.
Right, but this is such a thoughtful response. I thought it might be nice to read it so people know what we're talking about.
Okay. That makes sense.
From Dr. Daniel, I think?
Yeah, this is from Daniel. Hi, Rhonda and David. I love listening to the podcasts and have found them enormously helpful both personally and professionally. Here are some of my responses to your questions and other feedback on the podcasts. It might be worthwhile as well to survey the listserv members through something like Google Forms to get more detail on their feedback. The live therapy sessions are great, and I prefer them broken into smaller sessions with commentary. The podcasts that utilize role plays to illustrate team therapy are also super helpful. The podcasts that are done as a series on topics like agenda setting or 5 secrets are also a great way to take a deep dive into a topic. Thank you both for this amazing gift. Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel, and all of you who wrote back to Rhonda on our informal survey questions. And I think the one thing we found out is that everyone who wrote back said that they really love the live therapy broadcast. It shows actually how to do team therapy, because you can try to explain things in a book or a lecture or a workshop and use role play, but there's no substitute for the real thing. So we're going to try as often as we can to have live therapy. But there is a conflict between some people who want shorter podcasts and some people just want to listen to the whole two-hour thing. And as a compromise, I thought the next couple live therapy podcasts we do will publish on a different day of the week. So you'll have your normal length Monday podcast like this one today. And in addition, we'll have like a Wednesday or a Thursday podcast of a live therapy session presented as a whole thing, probably with a little commentary at the start and the end for those of you who want to listen to it all at once. And if you want to listen to it but break it up, then you can just stop it halfway through and listen to the second half, at whenever you like. So thank you for that. It means a lot to us when you tell us what you like in the podcast and also what you don't like. A couple quick things. Do you know when this one is going to be roughly? This won't be after February 9th, will it?
No, this is going to be published on January 20th.
Oh, yeah. So if you're a therapist looking for CE credits, we're going to have an awesome one-day workshop on February 9th. It will be Jill Levitt and myself on high-speed methods to reduce resistance and boost motivation. You'll get 7 CE credits, and you can join in person in Palo Alto, or you can join from anywhere in the world with live streaming. There are 7 CE credits as well. And you can get all the details on my website, on my workshop page. And the website, as you probably know, is www.feelinggood.com. And if you are interested as well, on May 17th, Jill and I are going to do one called the Cognitive Distortion Starter Kit, and we're going to show you the best techniques for each of the 10 distortions, and you can find that one on my website as well. And let me see if I have one other quick announcement here. I think that's about it. So let's
You reminded me that this episode is going to be published on January 20th, which is the celebration of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday this year. So I want to acknowledge that to everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, we're going to have an upcoming podcast. Not exactly sure the exact date, but we got a great question on how to respond using the 5 secrets, especially the disarming technique, to racist statements. And we're asking for a bit more information from the fellow who asked the question, but I think that should be a good one. We had one on this topic already, and then BBC in London picked up on it and asked me to do a special radio program with them, or be part of a special radio program, which I recorded about a month ago.
Oh.
And it'll probably come out, well, it's probably already come out, probably in December or January of 2020. So that's a hot topic, I think.
Yeah, really important topic to address.
Oh, here's the other thing I meant to say. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No, that's okay.
That some of you have been promoting the podcasts on your lists. And I'll try to put this in the show notes for today. But the link to the list of Feeling Good podcasts on my website, if you send that out to any emailing list you're on and tell people, this is, if you like the Feeling Good podcast, just say these are really great, and send them that link, and then they can look at the list of all 170 or so podcasts so far, and maybe get some help, because if they're a therapist, they can learn a lot of good therapy techniques from the podcast. And if it's a general citizen human being, probably like the rest of us, gets pretty anxious and a little depressed sometimes, and people who listen to the podcast seem to get a lot of personal help, so you'll be doing them a favor.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So shall we get started? Is there anything else you want to say?
No, I don't know why you put the earphones on.
I just feel cool with the earphones on.
Oh, okay. All right. Because I'm right here, you can hear me.
You don't have to comment on every stupid thing I do.
Yeah.
All right, this is from a listener named Sean. And he said we could use his real name, so his name is Sean, as I said. And he sent you this beautiful email that said, "Hi, Dr. Burns. Hope all is well since our last email. On podcast 164 about how to help, excellent as always, it dawned on me after hearing it why recently I have been getting defensive when I'm having a hard day at work, or the difficulties of finding a new job. Close friends would, instead of offering compassion, would, while trying to be helpful, give advice. Often their advice was something I had already thought of, or I knew wouldn't work. They then would appear to want to argue with me when I tried to explain why it wouldn't work. Subsequently, I'd end up more frustrated than I did before. I was just trying to blow off steam when they asked how things were. Your podcast shed light on why that is. It also taught me not to try to help, as I am often always the one wanting to be helpful to a friend or stranger."
Thank you. That's Sean?
Yes, that was Sean.
Yeah, I love that comment, Sean, and that was one of our most popular podcasts ever, and I think one of the most helpful podcasts is How Not to Help. And so if you haven't listened to that one, I think it'll be a real eye-opener.
Yeah, I think that was one of the best ones too.
Yeah, and it's good for therapists, because therapists make that mistake, and families and loved ones and friends make that mistake. When someone's upset, most people jump in and try to help, and usually it's a source of irritation to the person who's upset.
Right. So next, This is from Cindy. "Dear David, I stumbled upon your teaching in another podcast a few months ago. Immediately I was stunned by how much your words echoed in my mind. I have listened to your book 3 times in Audible and many of your podcasts. You changed my life. 3 exclamation points.
Wow.
I am much more relaxed now and I can sleep. I talked about you with my massage therapist and she bought your book for her daughter who has anxiety attacks and her niece. Her daughter is an aspiring artist who said that she plans to buy your book and give them away to teens when she becomes famous."
It is so awesome and so kind.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's really validating. "I now ask you to change another life, that of my daughter's. She has been depressed for more than 20 years, suicidal. She bought a noose, watches suicide movies, and has talked about ways to kill herself. No therapists could help her. We went to therapy together this past summer, and it only ended that she abruptly canceled and is no longer responding to me by any means, phone, text, card, or email. The last time I saw her was late August, and she was very down and had very poor personal hygiene. I have since sent her a loving text at least every other day. I offered to drive to her city an hour away to have dinner with her. I sincerely apologized for everything I could think of that I have done wrong since she was a child. I sent gifts to her by mail. I invite her to come for holidays. I ask her cousins to call. She did respond to them. No response to me at all. I am wondering how to communicate with a loved one who just totally shuts you off. Always your fan, Cindy. Wow, that's really a scary situation. I'd like to know your answer to that too.
Yeah, well, thank you, Cindy, and I can really understand the agony and panic, maybe frustration too, at having a daughter who's depressed and suicidal. I can't imagine a more painful situation to be in, to be honest. And you know, when our kids, like most teenagers, you know, had some turbulence, and I can remember once with our daughter, she was upset and she went running off into the woods and hid behind a rock, and I was in a state of total panic and thinking, what if she's severely depressed and suicidal? I was just in a state of agony, and found her hiding behind this huge boulder, and it was painful. And she's doing great now. I just love her to death. But it's so hard for a parent to have to go through those things. I'm going to refer you, Cindy, to two of the podcasts I think have useful information. You're making the common mistake of just trying to throw niceness at somebody, and you're certainly to be applauded and admired for that, but it's just not effective. And I think the podcast we were talking about just a little while ago, and if you hand me that piece of paper, I think I put them
Here you go.
here. I'm going to link to two podcasts. One is the one How to Help and How Not to Help. And I put the podcast in the show notes, and I should have put the number.
It's 164.
Oh, 154, great.
64.
That will be very, very helpful. You know, helping by listening, and that's a pretty forceful podcast to show you exactly what to do and exactly what not to do. And then the other podcast I think that could be very helpful is the one on how to talk to someone who refuses to talk to you. And that's one of the three advanced secrets of effective communication, called multiple choice empathy and multiple choice disarming technique. And if you need even more information on how to use these powerful communication techniques, I would suggest my book, Feeling Good, The New Mood Therapy, that describes how to use them. There's a whole chapter on how to talk to a angry teenager who refuses to talk. There's written exercises and a lot of things that can be helpful. But mothers and fathers almost always do kind of the wrong thing when it comes to trying to connect with a rebellious, depressed teenager. Mm-hmm. You have any more on that, Rhonda?
No, I think that's good.
Oh, okay. All right.
I don't think her daughter's a teenager. I think she's a little bit older than that, but I'm sure the techniques will.
Yeah, it's the same
apply.
Dynamic with people of any age.
Right. Yeah. Okay, here's your next one. Hi, Dr. Burns. I know your new book, Feeling Great, is coming out in 2020, but I was wondering if you had an estimate of when in 2020 it will come out. Thanks.
This is a quick answer. September 2020 is the current target date. The editing is coming along, and then we're going to get into marketing, and we're excited about that. Oh, and I had another cool thing to tell you.
Oh, what?
That Jeremy Caramel and I are busily at work on a new app. We'll try to suck you into the project, I'm sure, at some point, if you're interested.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
And we're making tremendous progress on it. We may even have a little prototype for people to to try out soon.
Oh, neat.
And we may even create a little podcast preview of it. We just came up with that idea this morning. I was working on it just before you
Oh, great.
you came.
That's a good idea. Okay,
and
next.
now for the main
course.
course.
This is. Can I use this first name here?
Yeah, I think I checked. Yeah, Lorna. Yeah, that's the fake first
That's
name.
the fake first name. Okay, this is from Lorna, which is a fake first name. And she said, "Hi, David. I've recently discovered your books and your podcast, and CBT has really been helping me in my personal life."
And for those of you who don't know, CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy.
"I really want to thank you for all the amazing work you do. The issue I'm having, however, seems to still really get my moods down, and I was wondering if perhaps you could offer some general advice via the podcast. I'm in a great relationship, but the ex-girlfriend of my partner has recently moved back to the city where we live, and now we are in similar social circles. They were together for a very long time, and now I'm really struggling with the prospect of spending time with her. When we all spend time together, it's actually fine. But afterwards, I really struggle with thinking about them together, getting to know her and thinking about her personality and how we compare. I think most people would find this uncomfortable, but it really has triggered a downward spiral for me. My partner and I argued about it, and I struggle to let things go that were said in arguments. Do you have any advice on dealing with the situation of an ex-partner being in the scene, and perhaps how not to dwell on things that were said during arguments? Thanks, Lorna."
And then I wrote back to Lorna, and then you can read her follow-up, and then we'll comment. I asked Lorna to be a bit more clear on what she said and what she needed. She said, "Do you have any advice on dealing with the situation of an ex-partner being on the scene, and perhaps how not to dwell on things?" And I said, "This sounds like feelings of jealousy and insecurity," and asked, "Is this woman a threat to your current relationship? Is that what you fear? Can you tell us just a little bit more? Because I just think this is a fascinating and common and important problem that people have."
And she responded, "Hi, David. Thanks so much for getting back to me. I don't actually think she is a threat to our relationship, and I don't feel that they have feelings for each other anymore. But it just makes me super uncomfortable to think about how long they spent together. I'm always comparing our relationship to what I think their relationship was like in the past. I know I should stop thinking about those things, but I really struggle to stop. I know my partner and I are very much in love, but I keep having thoughts like, it's not fair that I have to spend time with her, or I feel really guilty because he wants to be friends with her, but can't due to how I feel about the situation. I also feel that he blames me. I was hoping you could shed some light on what you think, in general, is a good strategy for dealing with situations where an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend of your partner is on the scene and you all have to spend time together. I do have feelings of jealousy and insecurity, but I struggle to understand why, as I don't believe they want to be together anymore at all. We had a few arguments about it initially where he said things like, 'You're just angry that I have an ex-girlfriend,' or 'What's the big deal about it all?' I was so hurt by the way he made my feelings seem petty and trivial. We have both apologized, but I keep remembering what he said and how hurt it made me feel. Do you have any advice on letting go of past arguments when the traumatic situation, i.e. his ex-girlfriend is still being around, is still going on? Thank you so much, Lorna."
Okay, well, this is great. I've got a ton of cool stuff for you, Lorna. One of my favorite topics. And I'll start with just a brief personal story about it and how I was up against something similar and the unusual way it got resolved. And then we'll give you a lot of specific techniques that you can use too. But you might want to read my book Intimate Connections, because it's a lot about this type of dynamic. And what do you do when you feel someone's giving you the runaround, or when an ex is intruding into your space? But when I was a medical school student, I was living with this young lady, Judy, who was pretty awesome, and we were living in Palo Alto in this house that she was renting. I think there might have been one or two other people would camp out there too sometimes. but at any rate, on a previous podcast, I talked about getting my jaw broken in a bar in Palo Alto, and I had surgery at Stanford, and my jaw was still wired shut, so it was very fragile. And the odd thing, I started noticing this car driving past our house in the evening, and then once it kind of turned on an angle and started blinking its lights on and off, the headlights shining on our front window, and then it went off, and I didn't know what was going on. It made me kind of paranoid. And then one evening, these two guys came to the front door, and they're what I call kind of sadistic, handsome-looking underworld types, kind of like people who you think are real mean.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't realize it at first, but it was Judy's ex-boyfriend.
Oh, wow.
And they said, we're here to see Judy or something like that. And I said, well, we're not interested, or something like that. And then they pushed their way into the house.
Oh.
And so I picked up the telephone. It was before 911. I dialed and I said, operator, can you send the police? We have an uninvited guest in our house. Can you send the police to this address? And so we heard the siren coming right away. And they looked at me and said, we're going to get you. And turned around and went off and sped off in their car. Huh. And then I thought, holy moly, what have I got myself into here? I just...
Where was Judy?
Well, she was just probably chortling off in her bedroom or, watching.
So she didn't come out and go, David, that's my ex-boyfriend. No, she just stayed out of the situation.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, kind of letting me hang myself. And I was so incredibly anxious. And I've got this broken jaw, so I'm pretty fragile already. And I was feeling, paranoid and jealous and insecure, kind of like your situation, Lorna, except maybe even on steroids.
Yeah.
And then I was telling Judy, and of course, this put me in this wimpy position. And so she started getting very scornful and disrespectful, and kind of, I wasn't getting any support from her. And I had this fellow who had been my mentor in psychodrama. His name was Sergio, and he was this hot-blooded Italian kind of underworld guy. And he was somebody who would never let himself get beaten by anybody at anything. And he was very hot-tempered, but he, I was a wimp, and so he was a good, influence for me, kind of an older guy who knew the ways of the world. Mm. And so this was really late at night, and I called him about 11 in a panic. I said, Sergio, what should I do? I'm totally screwed. And he says, oh no, this is an easy situation to handle. I'll tell you exactly what to do. He says, these guys are going to go out and get drunk, and they'll wake up tomorrow morning with a hangover. And so you call him before he wakes up. So he'll be just feeling horrible, and then say to him that you're really sorry that you got in the way of his relationship with Judy, and that you think he should have every right to spend all the time he wants with Judy, and so just tell him that you're going to clear out of the house and you're going to be gone all day. And you've told Judy that, and I told Judy that I'm going to invite you to come on over. And so you two can kind of hang out and see maybe you've got something in common again. I'm certainly not going to stand in your way. And then Sergio said he'll be so drunk and hungover he won't even want to see Judy. And he says that meanwhile you take your motorcycle and you go up in the hills and find a party somewhere and just you have a wild day. And then you come home in the evening, and you're going to see some magic happen. So I said, okay, Sergio, I'm going to do it. So I told Judy, I said, clean up the house, whatever you do. I called this guy. I invited him over. I'm going to hop on my motorcycle and leave. And the basic principle here.
And Judy's response was?
I think it kind of blew her mind. I
Yeah.
think it kind of stunned her. She was expecting me to be jealous and possessive and try to hang on and be in my wimp role, and suddenly I wasn't playing that role anymore. I think it was a shock to her. I think she started saying, "Well, I don't really care about him," and we broke up, stuff like that. I
Yeah.
said, "Well, listen, don't prejudge it. He's a good-looking guy, and he'll probably come over, and it's fine if you guys want to, get together again." And so I got on my motorcycle. I just felt so relieved and triumphant. It was like not chasing. See, when someone gives you a hard time, don't chase them. You have to be willing to let go and believe in yourself. And then I found this kind of a cabin type house in the woods. I was driving my motorcycle through the woods, and there were these people there partying. And I found this gorgeous young lady
God, this is
in a hammock. and she invited me into the hammock with
David,
her.
are you making this
This
up?
is true. This is God's truth. And we started making out in the hammock. And it was like one of the most fun experiences of my life. And then at the end of the evening, I got on my motorcycle and drove back. And he hadn't stopped by. But Judy, who would never do anything for me, she was kind of on the tough side, I would say. She had cleaned the house immaculately and prepared a beautiful dinner for me, neither of which she'd ever been willing to do before. And she was just so admiring, and what can I do for you, So that's kind of some principles there. Now, I've got a lot of other techniques for Lorna, but why don't we
So
summarize?
you're suggesting that Lorna let go of the idea of being possessive of her boyfriend.
Yeah, she's
and
trying
say,
to
hey,
control him. She's almost forcing them to
get back together.
To get back together, because you only want what you can't get.
Right.
And by constantly worrying and kind of keeping them apart, you show yourself to be weak. Whereas an option, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I can't treat people and don't give advice in therapy anyway. But you could, just encourage them to spend time. You don't have to go and hang out with them.
Well, they're in the same social circles. So what if she's
invited? Well, that can be true too. But you can even tell him, if you want to spend some time with her as your friend.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because there'll be other people at the party I can talk to.
Yeah, exactly. But that's something at a deep level. That's a form of enlightenment, and it's the death of the controlling, grasping.
Maybe Lorna will find somebody at the party to kiss.
Yes, absolutely.
Which we're not advocating.
Puts things in a new perspective. But this is the needy self, the death of the needy self. Now, also in intimate connections, the first section is how to overcome your need for love or your love for any specific purpose, and how to find happiness when you're alone. And once you discover that you don't need love, or you don't need some person's love to feel perfectly happy, it's tremendously empowering.
Definitely.
Another thing that she could do is to use self-disclosure. How would she do that?
She would say to her boyfriend, I'm not trying to control you, and I don't want to, influence you, but I just want you to know I feel really jealous and insecure, and it's really about me and my feelings, more about what you're doing, but I just thought I'd let you know I feel really jealous.
Yeah, and she could add stroking too, and it's because I just, I just really love you and think you're cool, but I know these feelings are kind of irritating and irrational, and I just wanted to let you know. She could also use self-disclosure with this other woman, but it's an art form, and it's not using self-disclosure in a demanding way.
Or a manipulative way.
Or in a manipulative way, but just to be genuine.
How would
and open.
she do that to the girlfriend?
Just say it's awesome that you're back and we're in the same social circles. I just want you to know that I think you're a beautiful, awesome person, and I know that you had a wonderful relationship with my boyfriend Robert, or whatever his name is, and I just want you to know that sometimes I feel kind of jealous and insecure, and so if I seem awkward when we're together, that would be why. But you should take it as a compliment, because it's because you're so cool, and I can't help but feeling a little intimidated or threatened.
I think that would be a lot more powerful than self-disclosure to her boyfriend.
Yeah.
I actually love that idea. I wish that Lorna would do that and then email us back.
Yeah. Okay, you got a beautiful invitation from Rhonda. And then another thing you see, if you were in therapy, we do positive reframing on your jealousy and your vigilance and show what that shows about you that's positive and awesome. See, you can't give up your jealousy and your anxiety if you want to cling to them and if you think they're helping you in some way. And what are some of the ways that her jealousy and vigilance are helping her and showing, really, really positive things about her?
Well, it really honors how much she loves her boyfriend.
That's a good one. What are some more? What are some benefits of the vigilance?
It protects her from getting hurt if he does end up leaving her.
Yeah, it keeps your eye on things, so you don't just let things slide and get complacent, and then all of a sudden he's having sex with her or leaving you or something. What are some other awesome things about feeling jealous and anxious and suspicious?
It kind of shows her values of monogamy is important to her.
Oh yeah, right. That's a beautiful thing. Yeah, and that loyalty.
That loyalty and monogamy and even integrity are important.
And then once we list all of that, we would say, if you press this magic button, your jealousy and anxiety and your vigilance is all going to disappear. All these beautiful things are going to disappear. Is that what you want? And then she'll probably say, oh, no, I don't want them all to go down the drain, but I don't want to be suffering like this. So how do we resolve that paradox?
Well, then we'd offer her the magic dial and say, well, let's see how much of the jealousy do you need to have so that you can keep, what's positive about it, but eliminate the pain and the suffering that it's causing you.
Do you need this 90% anxiety and this 90% jealousy? Would 10% be enough? And another thing that I found personally helpful, because I think when you're young and passionate, it's pretty natural for some of us to feel jealous and insecure. I know I did a lot when I was young. And I asked a colleague about it and how she handled it. And she said, well, I just decided it's just not worth it. And life is a lot peaceful where you just say you're going to trust your partner and let the chips fall where they may, and that was just really helpful for me personally, And then if somebody takes advantage of you, well, that's kind of on them, and it's unfortunate, but life goes on, and you can get over that. And they weren't such an awesome person anyway if they betrayed you, and you felt you had a faithful relationship. You can also do the downward arrow technique if you're doing a daily mood log, to get at the self-defeating beliefs. And you'd probably find you have the love addiction, fear of rejection, fear of being alone. There's chapters on those topics in Feeling Good and in the Feeling Good Handbook.
Of how to do the downward arrow?
Yeah, we've had a podcast on that. Probably won't try to go into that today, but it's, you say, what are you the most afraid of? And then if that happened, what are you most afraid of? And you keep generating new thoughts. And if he did leave me or had sex with her or went back with her, what would that mean to me? Why would that be upsetting to me? Another key to it is that, and I've mentioned this a few minutes ago, but overcoming the fear of being alone and the need for this man's love or any man's love is the first section of the book, Intimate Connections. And I can't emphasize the importance of that enough. And read the chapter in Feeling Good, the mood therapy on the love addiction.
Yep. Yes.
And then you brought up something that was just fantastic about apologizing. And I hadn't noticed that when I read her email. Tell us what you're thinking there.
Well, when I read her second email, I thought, this is a good example of why saying I'm sorry, while saying, that's what we're taught, that if we hurt someone, we need to say we're sorry to them. And I'm not saying I'm not discouraging people from saying I'm sorry, but that's really not enough because it's not acknowledging the other person's feelings. It's not sharing your own feelings.
That's right.
It's not like probing with and asking them questions so they could tell you more.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't seem like saying you're sorry is enough in this situation.
Yeah. It's saying I'm sorry, just a way of avoiding the pain that they're both feeling, and it's really dysfunctional. I'm sorry can be effective, but 95% of the time it's just dysfunctional. It's a way of saying shut up. I don't want to hear any more about this. I was treating a very turbulent couple, really nice people, but the he did a lot of out-of-town sales, and when he was out of town, she discovered she was pregnant by him, but she didn't want more children. She had an abortion without telling him. And when he came back, he was just heartbroken because he wanted another child. And then to get back at her, he started having an affair with a woman that lived 2 blocks away.
Oh my gosh.
And he slept at her house every night for 6 months.
Oh.
And his wife had to tell the children, oh, Daddy had to work late tonight. They'd say, where's Daddy? And then, it was just heartbreaking for her. And then I tried to treat them as a couple, and I felt they had negative feelings that just what you said, that needed to be expressed and listened to. And she would try to say things during communication drills like, it was so, and they were hurting each other. I mean, there's no victim here.
Right.
But she would say things, that I felt so hurt and humiliated for those 6 months. And of course, she also felt angry. And then he would say, well, you've said that already. I've apologized. Let's move on.
Right.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
He was just using apology as a way of saying,
I'm sorry. Let's stop talking about it. Let's stop dealing with it.
Yeah. So that's huge. And then the last thing I thought of for Lorna, and we have dozens of things. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Lorna, I just loved your question. I'm so grateful you wrote to us. But another thing is exposure. Well, I have 2 more things. One is exposure. You're afraid, you imagine them together and you get upset. Well, then you try to avoid that. Instead, you can, and I'm not recommending this, I'm just telling you as general teaching. You have to do this with a therapist, but to fantasize that on purpose. Make yourself as jealous and anxious as possible for as long as possible. It might take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or longer. But eventually, those fantasies will lose their power over you. Is that clearly explained?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just to imagine the 2 of them together, and try to make yourself as anxious as possible about it, and try to sit in that highest state of anxiety as long as you can, and it naturally will taper off because your body can't stay in that high anxiety state forever.
Yeah. And lastly, I had a law student, the nicest guy in the world, but he'd been going with his girlfriend, and they broke up. And I'm probably not supposed to say girlfriend, boyfriend, but I'll just use that language. That was the language she used. And she started going with another fellow in their class. So he'd see them together at every class, and he was having trouble concentrating on the lectures. And then he would have intrusive fantasies of them having sex and stuff. And then he would find himself driving past her apartment, almost like stalking, to see if his car was there.
Wow.
And he was just torturing himself. And what turned out, it's a technique that's rarely effective, but it was effective for this problem, is I had him wear just a wrist counter like golfers wear on their wrist. In fact, he played golf, so he had one. And I just told him to count each time he has a fantasy of them together. Just click it. So the number on the dial goes up, and then at the end of the day, this is called self-monitoring, record the number on your calendar and agree to do that for 4 weeks, because I told him often in the 3rd week, the number will suddenly start to decrease, although it may stay very elevated for 3 weeks. I say that's typical. I told him it might not work, but some people have found it helpful. And sure enough, he started doing, and I said, you're not allowed to drive past her house either. That's called response prevention. And so he agreed to it. And then in the 3rd week, I mean, he was having like 90 sexual fantasies of them together every day. And then they just started dropping. And toward the end of the 3rd or 4th week, they went down to 0. And he couldn't care less. He lost all interest in her. And then he found himself a new girlfriend. So there's yet another technique. And these are more than techniques. They're philosophies of life. They are techniques you can read about in my books, like Intimate Connections and Feeling Good and When Panic Attacks and Feeling Good Together.
Feeling good together.
But there's also a kind of death of the self, a death and rebirth experience. And I recently did an interview for some prominent Jewish magazine, but I can't remember the name of it. But I was talking to the editor about, how some people get kind of enlightened and a death and rebirth experience. And I was asking, is there anything in Jewish theology like that? He said, oh yes, it's the concept of ascent and descent. And that's all he said. But I thought that was neat. I think a lot of these ideas are woven into the philosophical basis of most religions, and it's what, to me, makes our work exciting and deeply meaningful. It's the spiritual component. I probably didn't say that very well, but you will now explain what I mean.
Well, actually, what I'm thinking of is, I wonder if the spiritual component is meaningful to you because you were raised by a Lutheran minister.
That's true, because I was supposed to be a minister, and my father, I've said this, called me David Dean Burns, so I'd be D.D. Burns D.D., because he thought I was D.D. Burns, and he said, someday you'll be D.D. Burns D.D. D.D. is Doctor of Divinity. That was an honorary theological degree he had, and that's what I thought when I was a little boy. But I went in a different direction, but now I'm kind of coming back. I don't mean religion that I'm coming back to, but spirituality is just, it's very real, it's very powerful, it's hard for people to grasp, and it is time to stop.
Well, Lorna, I just want to really invite you to do any of these techniques, and if you do, let us know how they turn out. But especially self-disclosure to the girlfriend, I think that's really an awesome one.
And thank you, Rhonda.
And thank you, David, and all of our listeners. This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this episode under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. The theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.